Hi, Alice.
Okay, Ross, over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. So Scott and Gwendolyn Bai and myself are on the development committee for Marion Friends meeting. So we are in the process of raising funds for a preservation campaign to help preserve our 1695 meeting house. And I just want to start out with saying happy National Historic Landmark Day. Yes, today is National Historic Landmark Day. This is just a crazy coincidence, but we are a National Historic Landmark, and today is National Historic Landmark Day. There are 90,000 buildings in the United States listed on the National Register of Historic Structures, historic buildings. And of those, there are 2,600, only 2,600 buildings that are National Historic Landmarks in the entire country. And Marion Friends Meeting is one of those. So we are very proud of our historic building, of our National Historic Landmark that the National Park Service has determined not just to be any old building, but one with national significance. And we couldn't agree more. So why does preservation matter? You know, we often have this internal debate in Marion Meeting. Well, how should we direct our limited resources? You know, money is, you know, we don't have a lot of money, but and how should we direct our funds? And wouldn't it be better to feed the homeless and to house the poor? And you know, what do we do? Why should we spend money protecting and preserving an old building rather than taking care of living people in need? And you know, it's an honest question, and you know, certainly taking care of the poor and feeding the hungry is an important and very deserved goal, and one that we share. But it needn't be an either or question. There's a lot of funding out there for historic preservation, and likewise there's funding to feed the homeless and to house the poor. So I think that preserving our historic heritage is something that is important for everybody. I mean, in Marion Meeting, you know, it was founded in 1682. And so this was, you know, one of the very first structures in Lower Marion. And, you know, I think it's the oldest religious structure, religious meeting house in the state of Pennsylvania. Construction was begun in 1695. Quakers often taking their time with a lot of things. Construction wasn't finished until 1715. So it's one of the reasons that Quaker meeting houses are often still here is because it takes Quakers so long to decide to make any changes, that things are still standing. And Quaker, certainly Marion Meeting is an example of that. There was a major renovation in 1829. And then we had another one around 10 years ago. But you know, we are trying to raise money to do a historic preservation survey of the entire site. So the site includes the 1695 meeting house, the 2 horse sheds, which are part of the National Historic Landmark Register. So they date from the early 1800s. There's the burial yard that goes back to 1682. There is the 1804 Joseph Price House, which is our caretaker's house. And we now have another building since 1950, the activities building, relatively recently in Quaker terms, that is our activities building in 1950 is now a historic structure. So anyway, we need to take a look at all of our buildings and our site. Maybe some folks have saw that the problem that we had on Montgomery Avenue a couple of years ago when our retaining wall collapsed. Those are the sort of issues that we're dealing with. So please go to our website, marionfriends.org, and you can see about our preservation needs to raise money. We received a $25,000 Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission grant for this project to do a historic survey. And we still need to raise about $40,000 more to meet our goal. And we're pretty close on our way there, but we still have a ways to go. So any support you can give would certainly be appreciated. One of the things that we decided to do with these lectures is to have them every other month. So our first lecture was with Emma Lapsansky Werner, who talked about the history of Quakerism in the community. And Dan Campbell, who is our preservation architect, will be talking about the history of the meeting house. And then in June, we will be having Dennis Montaigne, who is a neighbor and also works for the National Park Service. And he'll be talking about our burial yard. And he is an expert in stone and monuments for the National Park Service nationwide. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll also have lectures on social issues too. So stay tuned. I'm very pleased to introduce Dan Campbell. Dan is a multi-state registered architect with over 35 years of experience in architecture, and he specializes in historic preservation. Prior to his private practice, Dan was employed for 14 years with John Milner Architects from Chadsford, and which is where we first worked with him on the projects probably 15 years ago. With the Milner firm, he worked on scores of projects of 17th, 18th, and 19th century buildings, specializing in many of them recognized as National Historic Register and historic landmark buildings. So he's now in private practice in Chester County, and he specializes in preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation of historic buildings. So we really couldn't have a better architect working on our project. And he leads numerous historic preservation plans and conducts architectural conditions assessments himself. And he leads teams of consultants in structural and mechanical and engineering fields to oversee the calculations and restoration budgets. His work has received numerous excellence awards from the Preservation Pennsylvania, the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia, the Delaware County Heritage Commission, and most importantly, from our perspective, he received an award from the Lower Merion Historical Architectural Review Board for his previous work on Merion Meeting House. So I'm very pleased to introduce Dan Campbell. Dan, take it away.
I'm having trouble. Can you hear me, Ross?
I can, yes.
Okay. Am I supposed to see my picture in speaker view?
You need to.
I don't need to see it. Am I on the screen or unmuted?
Well, you need to take over the screen. You need to hit the share screen at the bottom.
Yeah, I just texted Scott because I lost the share screen.
There you are.
I lost the Zoom commands. I'm sorry.
You're there now. I see you full screen.
Is everybody seeing my screen?
We're not seeing your screen, Dan, but
Did you make him host? Is he host?
yes.
He's a
yep,
co-host.
Dan is co-host.
I'm trying the tab. I'm trying the alt tab and I'm not getting.
Is your presentation is open, ready to go?
It's open on my screen.
Okay.
Beverly Fitz can see you on her screen.
Technical difficulties. 1 second, everyone, please.
I'm tabbing through the screens and I should be clicking on the Zoom screen.
Nope, you should be clicking on your presentation.
I did that.
Okay, so then click on Alt tab through to Zoom
Okay.
and then share screen.
It's not highlighted.
You don't see share screen at the bottom?
No, I'm not. That's what I mean. I'm not seeing those commands. I'm sorry.
Hang on 1 second.
Do you see the green button, share content?
No, I'm not seeing that. And I'm not seeing the other ones around the edges that are usual in Zoom.
Click on the bottom of your screen. And something should pop up.
Yeah. You should see mute, stop video.
I understand that.
Okay.
But it's not there.
Oy. Okay.
Okay,
I'm on this, I see you up in my right-hand corner, but
Can he send it to you by email?
yeah, can you send it to
And you
me?
can post it.
And then I can do the,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't even know how to get to back to my desktop. I'm sorry.
Okay.
well, Dan, one
Okay.
thing you can do is why don't you just close out of Zoom entirely and then come back on? And we'll see
If you
if
go to the button at the top right, you can limit the size.
Or you could just hit the escape key.
That's what I mean. They're not there.
What about the view key button?
Let me start over again.
Yeah, why don't you log, just close out of Zoom.
Are you in full screen? Because if you're in full screen, you do lose a lot of things. You have to get in not full screen view. You have to go out of,
I'm going to,
He may have logged out.
So sorry about this, folks.
Yeah.
Little technical glitch here.
All right. Ross, I'm going to admit Dan again, and then you'll need to make him co-host when oh, you did that already.
Right.
All right.
okay, sorry about that, folks. Thank you for your patience. Now I'm going to share screen now. Is that right?
Okay.
I just made you co-host, so yes. This all worked yesterday when we did our dry run.
Oh, we're almost there, Dan.
There we go.
There we go. Now you can hit slide from beginning.
From the beginning.
Yep, start slideshow. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So, sorry for the hold up, folks.
All right, we got it.
Thank you for your patience, everyone, and for attending. As Ross said, I've been working at this site for 15 years. It's really become a beloved building to me as it is to the Society of Friends, I'm sure. In 1681, a group of 17 Welsh Quaker families from North Wales purchased 5,000 acres of land from William Penn in his recently chartered colony. Their land became part of what was known as the Welsh Tract, a 40,000 acre expanse located on the west bank of the Schuylkill River in that area now known as parts of Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester County. These Welsh settlers were led by John Thomas and Edward Jones, so were officially known as the Thomas and Jones Company. However, they optimistically called themselves the Marionist Adventurers after the county in Wales from which they had come. I love that illusion of the adventurers, that optimism. They had been so persecuted and imprisoned for their beliefs in Britain and Wales that they were not permitted to build meeting houses or to meet publicly or privately before the Toleration Act passed by Parliament in 1689. So William Penn's promise of religious freedom attracted these Society of Friends members to the New World. They arrived in 1682 with the desire to establish their religious community and also a Welsh stronghold in the new North American colony. And they settled here in Southeast Pennsylvania. And they named it Marion Township after Marionshire of their origin. Before we start, I should give a little education on historic preservation. The National Park Service has 4 methodologies that we talk about and are permitted by the Park Service. One is preservation, which we most know is keeping things as they are. Restoration is keeping things as they are and putting other things back. Rehabilitation may be putting other things back with some modifications. And even reconstruction is allowed when an item is missing or can be duplicated from physical evidence or photographic evidence. We seldom see a building that is all from one period. Most historic buildings are evolutionary because styles and construction techniques change by quarter century, half century, or whole centuries. The preservation architect must often peel back layers of successive construction to reach original building, or even remove 20th century covering materials to find original materials and design. The built in 1695 to 1715, the Mary and Friends Meeting House was this building on your left. There are many etchings of the Mary and Friends meeting. I intentionally chose one that has this whimsical curvature of the edges of the eaves. I don't think that was actually a fact. No one has found evidence of that before. I think that's just an artist license that's been used for this etching. It had a pent roof around the front as it does now, and small hood roofs sticking out the two sides in the front. The building on the right is the one we know today, and it was extensively remodeled in 1829 during the period when America loved a Greek revival style, actually inspired by Thomas Jefferson. So it got stucco over the stone. The stucco has scored lines in it to appear like limestone. It got a modest Greek type porch or portico with columns that are not fluted like a Doric column, but they are faceted around the edges with 8 sides. Inside the building during the remodeling, it even has a date stone on the western elevation which says built 1695, rebuilt 1829. Inside the building was had some original fabric altered. In fact, the ceiling was raised. I'm sorry, a formerly lofted ceiling in the main room. The main meeting room had a drop ceiling put in where it was previously lofted. As Ross said, it's a National Historic Landmark. It's been long recognized as a principal icon of national significance in religious, cultural, and architectural history of the Philadelphia area. The National Park Service recommends that such buildings be studied with things such as Historic Structures Report, one that they have formulated, and that was done decades ago for the meeting. More recently, in the last 15 or 20 years, there are 2 reports which we are focusing on. It's guiding our work today. In the early 21st century, a student in the graduate school of University of Pennsylvania did this master's thesis report on your left about the meeting house, particularly the meeting house. This is an extensive thesis with illustrations and using primary source research material, going back to original historic documents, and then was confirmed through painstaking in-person observation. The second was an historic preservation plan on the right, prepared by John Milner Architects in 2006, very similar to an HSR, except not by name. We call it a preservation plan. For the Milner report, David Facenda had served as historian on the team. He was employed by John Milner at that time, and with myself as the principal investigating architect. We had a team of structural engineer from Keystone Hood, very good firm in Philadelphia, and mechanical electrical engineers from Bruce Brooks and Associates, both firms from Philadelphia. The Milner Preservation Plan recommended approximately 50 preservation measures and rehabilitative upgrades for the meeting house building, totaling of which was estimated to cost about $1 million in 2006 dollars. The largest scope item was a structural intervention to correct serious flaws in the timber roof structure. That project was undertaken first because of its high priority category. The Milner report broke things down into high, medium, and low priorities. Secondarily, we did a project on the porch to make it universally accessible, and some life safety items at the same time on the interior. There's also a program from the National Park Service called the Historic American Building Survey, known as HABS, in which architects are directed to document historic buildings in a prescribed format of drawings and photographs. The HABS program was brought in during the New Deal as a way of employing architects and engineers and preserving or recording historic structures at the same time, in case they ever have to be duplicated or something should happen to destroy such historic resources. So in September of 1940, over 50 photographs were taken by the HABS program. Then later in the 20th century, in 1997, these measured drawings were taken and prepared in plan view. As you see that we see the floor plan and the balcony plan here. In elevations, we see the front elevation and side elevation, which is typical of both sides in this drawing. And most importantly, a section was cut through the building, which we see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Also recorded was the construction of this interesting and unusual timber framing. The meeting house has often been noted for its unusual T-shaped floor plan that distinguishes it from other surviving Quaker meeting houses in Great Britain and the New World of the tandem type, men on one side, women on another. It has an unusual timber framed roof structure similar to early English and Welsh timber frames, in which the top chord of the frame that slopes down the roof is bent at the bottom, or it's cut into a hockey stick sort of shape so that it bears on the wall better. I was first introduced to this building when we were doing a roofing project on this. Can everyone see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
On this roof, we were doing a roof replacement project of the cedar shingles, and the contractor called me up about this north-facing roof. He said, "Do I want to follow the line of the shingles straight across the roof, or do I want to follow the bow in the wall, which is about 8 inches out in the center?" So that was a disturbing thing to learn, that this crook in the center, which is a very important one and comes down right near this chimney, had been cut during the 1828 renovation when they put in central heating in the form of this chimney and some wood stoves down here. So they had cut through the bottom chord of the truss and recognized that that was not a nice thing to do. So they constructed this little A-frame sort of thing, like a sawhorse or a swing set, which was meant to pick up the cut piece at this point, but then all it did was carry that load back onto the same member on either side of the chimney. So that was not a favorable thing to do. It was sort of intuitive engineering that didn't really work, and that allowed this crook frame to move outward, pushing this wall out at least 8 inches. So we studied several ways to repair this, but the structural engineer was very wise in suggesting that we instead install a truss right through the center here, carrying the load of all the crooks. There are four of them across the building. Fortunately, the original designer put this king post off-centered, so he was having trouble making this connection with 3 members, so put it off to the side, and that allowed us to put our truss right through the center, supporting the top chord of the truss would support this ridge, and the bottom chord of the truss would be strapped to the bottom member of the crook frame. So the other benefit of the truss was that it could be designed in pieces and carried up to the attic through a small hole which goes from the balcony to the gallery. So the engineer designed it in 6 to 8 foot long pieces with these T-shaped pieces of steel to be the connectors, and there's a wooden post that gets connected, an engineered wood post that gets connected in the center here, these holes on the sides are for cables or rods, steel rods that go on a diagonal. In a truss has a top and bottom member, and then there are verticals and diagonals. The verticals are in compression in structural terms. The diagonals are in tension in structural terms. So the verticals could be made out of wood and the diagonals could be made out of steel rods. So this is laying out of the of the bottom chord of the truss. We had this beautiful 18-inch stone wall at the end of each end of the attic for this to bear on. This is the bearing at the attic. The stone had plenty of capacity for that. This is the final bearing of the top chord of the truss. Here you see the diagonal cable rod being attached to that metal piece. At the ridge, we put a short collar across between the crook frames, and that top chord of the truss bears underneath of that. And this strap got tied around the bottom chord of the crook frame so that it could hold up the bottom as well. And then the steel rods were tightened up with this turnbuckle here until they tightened up and straightened up. Literally, once this was tightened, these rods would sing almost like a guitar string, or you could rub something on it and make a singing sound. This worker behind Frank Strawbridge here is tightening up the truss rod in the final adjustment. So that solves the structural problem without going through each part of the aspects that were more difficult to repair. The engineer was wise to do it all with one member. Next on our list of priorities was accessibility to the front door. You can see that on this upper left-hand picture, there's a clever plywood ramp that someone had made and was used for years, maybe longer, because there was a step up at the front door, and the patio under the porch was flush to the driveway. Anticipating that we needed to make a flush entrance at the door itself, we designed a new foundation for this porch. There are beautiful bluestone slabs outside, which were lifted up and put aside. A new foundation was dug for a concrete slab with a turn down edge. And this is an iron support that was underneath the beams of the columns. You can see that the porch was temporarily held up with this rig while the posts were removed. The bluestone slabs were numbered and left in the yard for reuse. After the foundation was poured, the masonry contractor reset the bluestone slabs in their same places. The posts were taken to one of the wagon sheds or horse sheds and restored with epoxy wooden Dutchman repairs and epoxy fillers. This is the bottom of the column that's been restored on the setting base. So this is the end result of the porch restoration. The columns are restored and put back. The bluestone slabs are back in their same places. There's now a flush entrance at the doors, double door there, and the plywood ramp was moved out to the edge of the porch. And in the next repaving of the driveway, the asphalt was brought up to the top of the porch slabs so that that's a completely universally accessible entrance. Next on our priority list was a wall that we had been monitoring along Montgomery Avenue. It's about 5 feet high at the western end, and it tapers down to about 3 feet high at the eastern driveway end near the General Wayne Inn. You can see how bulging it was. So we created design and engineering documents to replace this portion of the wall. It happened to have its problem right where it met a mortared part of the wall, met what we call dry stacked or dry laid with no mortar. So this result, the bowing of the stone was a result of that. In fact, we were afraid that it would fall before we could do our project, but we did have the contractor bid it, and sure enough, it collapsed on a rainy Friday night, and he went out there and temporarily shored it over the weekend. So with the engineered drawings and Lower Merion made sure we met all existing building codes. We had to have engineering calculations checked by the township engineer. The footing had to be down below the frost line over here. You can see all the rebar that had to go in to resist this 6 feet of backfill in front of the meeting house. The back of the design has a concrete block wall with many weep holes for water to pass through. The sidewalk is literally right here along this side of this orange fence, and Montgomery Avenue is another 4 feet over here. So we had to close a lane during 9 and 3 in the daytime to do this work. Contractor was very proficient and poured the footing, put in the block wall, reused all the same stones here that were on in the previous wall, so that the result was this. It looks exactly like it did before. We even left the mortar out of the joints. There is mortar fully behind the stones, but we left the mortar out of the joints so it had that dry laid look again. In the currently proposed study, so after, as Ross said, after the porch restoration project, the Lower Merion Township gave a good stewardship award to the meeting for the work that was being done at the meeting house. By 2017, I was practicing as in my private practice as a sole proprietor architect, and the meeting approached me for a proposal to prepare a new preservation plan, basically an update to a 15-year update to the Miller report, studying the meeting house a little, but also including site walls and 2 horse sheds that are associated with the site and close to the meeting. This would include the entire site with stormwater and drainage, including many stone retaining walls and freestanding walls, which we just practiced on at the Montgomery Avenue wall, and as well as the burial yard. So this is the cover of the professional services proposal that's now been granted money from the Pennsylvania Museum and Historical Commission, Historical and Museum Commission. You can see the number of consultants on here is the preservation architect, structural engineer, MPE engineer, civil engineer to take care of site and drainage problems, a land surveyor so that can be updated, and materials conservators for the graveyard gravestone restorations. And then there's a cost estimator on the team so that he can estimate the cost of these items by in the high, medium, and low categories, which I use in my preservation plans. So these are the items that are basically, these are the items we know we're going to study. So you can see that the date of this proposal is February 2019. It actually started in February in 2017, and then 2018 and 2019. The building committee and the trustees were persevered through 3 applications to the PHMC for this proposal, and they finally received a grant from the Keystone Grant Program. So the items we're planning to study next are the 2 horse sheds. One small linear shed is near the meeting house. One larger L-shaped one is farther away, closer to the activities building. The activities building was built around 1960. We have retrieved the drawings from the archives of the meeting. It currently has drainage problems at the rear, particularly. It's on a very flat piece of land, so it doesn't drain very well. Except behind it, there is a hill, so the water does compound at the back of the building. It also needs universal accessibility. The bathrooms are not accessible, and there's no accessible entrance from the exterior. And the kitchen could use some upgrades as well. Also, the Joseph Price house is on the far side, eastern side of the property, and serves as the caretaker's residence. It's close to Montgomery Avenue, and although it's been well maintained, it never had a full assessment of the conditions for architectural, structural, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical to determine what might be needed there. And then there are various items on the site, many stone walls, a few iron fences and around the graveyard, and gravestones, all needing assessment and restoration recommendations. And then by making cost estimations for all of these items, we'll be able to submit to granting foundations and state again, similar to what we did in 2006 and 7. So this is the proposal that's Ross was talking about now. So we have the smaller horse shed, which is close to the meeting. It's about 6 bays. It has these timber structures inside that we call vents. It's got some interesting timber framers details like scarf joints and little bearing blocks and mortise and tenons with pegs through them and so on. There's been some repairs before. You can see that they've sistered, someone has sistered new rafters alongside of these rafters. There are holes in the roofs. The roofs are terrible, even more than this. There are now gaping holes in the roof, and it's covered with moss to the degree that I think the moss is holding the roof together, actually, shingles anyway. So that's the small horse shed. Further from the meeting is another horse shed that's L-shaped. I looked closely, I've examined it closely, and this portion of it is almost identical to the small shed. It's one line of 5 or 6 bays. And then there's another one that comes out forward of it, which was added later. You can tell it was made a little more decorative by putting these bracketing in front of the posts. Could have been from maybe 1870 or 1880, given that kind of decoration, what you call the Victorian period. And the one, actually the vents in that portion are in worse condition. Someone has put a lot of new diagonal braces on that, in that area, to maintain that structure. The activities building was built circa 1960. There is a step up at these doors. This is the door into the back hallway. This is the door into the front entrance. They're all not accessible to wheelchairs or disabled people, what we call universally accessible now. There are drainage problems in the back where this hill comes down from a playground and the water is compounding against the back of the building. You can see the little copper dams that are installed in front of these crawl space windows. The kitchen is in this area here, this rear wing, and it could use an upgrade to be more compliant with public health rules in the township and county. The Joseph Price house. Joseph Price was a 4th generation Quaker from that original tract migration I talked about. This house is very close to Montgomery Avenue. I visited recently, and you can feel the vibrations of trucks inside when you're in the basement. So it's been fairly well maintained, but it would be wise to do a conditions assessment and recommendations for what could be needed now or in the next 3, 5, or 10-year periods, which is what we call low, medium, and high priorities. So this is the basic site plan. I'm sorry for the poor resolution of this. This is from this is enlarged from a HABS drawing. You can see the meeting house up here in its T-shaped plan. This is the small shed, and the back wall of it is actually a retaining wall. This is the Montgomery Avenue wall that we replaced recently. There's another stone wall that surrounds the graveyard, the burial ground. There's an iron fence on top of that. This is the activities building, and the Joseph Price house is down here on Montgomery Avenue. So here's the burial ground wall with the iron fence. It's all very historic, character defining feature of the site. There are various stone walls. Some of them are retaining walls. This is the back wall of the small horse shed with a crack in it. This is a burial yard wall which separates it from the General Wayne Inn, which is now being used as a daycare center. So these are some of the site elements that will be studied by the civil engineer and the structural engineer. So I thank everybody for coming to this presentation today, and I want to thank Ross Mitchell and Scott Reynolds for setting this up so that I could talk to all of you. And I acknowledged the information I received from the David Facenda thesis, the John Milner Architects plan, also a study by the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting in 2002, which studied meeting houses all over the Delaware Valley, and the Lower Merion Historical Society book published in 2000 called The First 300, The Amazing and Rich History of Lower Merion. I recommend that highly for people who are interested in Lower Merion history. So that's all I have for my presentation. If someone would help me with the
Sure,
chat
Dan.
feature, I'd be happy to answer some questions. If that's how you want to do that.
Yeah, or, well, the other is, I think we have enough folks so that if you just want to unmute and ask your question, you can, or you can post it in chat and either Ross or I can read your question.
I mean, I'm not muted now, am I?
No.
You are not muted.
So this is Laura. And before the questions come, I want to just say, as a member of the meeting who's not familiar with architecture or what's below the ground or underneath the meeting house, it's really been remarkable for the information that you've shared and the history that's in the buildings and the grounds itself. And it increases my experience of worshiping there in ways I was not aware of, and also makes it so clear why this is a jewel that we need to restore and do whatever it takes to make that happen. And I could tell, Daniel, that you're a poet also, because every once in a while you throw in a phrase or two that was quite lovely and beautiful in your description of this building and this property. And I appreciate your affection for it and your work to help us preserve it.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say that it has a very subdued elegance to it. You know, Quakers are a big favor of simplicity, and that belief is carried out in this building as well. Anyone else? Alice Hoffman, it's nice to see you.
Yay. Well,
I have a que-
I have another, okay, go ahead.
So I do have a question. This is a large project. So is there a timeline for for getting each project done individually, one at a time? Or is this something that once the funding becomes available, happens all at once?
I use the method of breaking the items up into, we do an assessment of everything at once. That's what the proposal is now, and it's been partially funded by PHMC. The report contains a list of items from the engineers and myself, and then the cost estimator puts an individual line item on for each one of those in the cost. And then I have them organized in a low, medium, and high priority columns, so that you can immediately look at what your high priority items are and what the total cost of those are, or medium or low. Or you can approach funders who want to fund just a particular line item. So if someone's interested in the iron fence or the graveyard or the accessibility issues, that can be funded from the line items.
So what do you know offhand what is at the top of this list? And is it the horse sheds?
Yeah, yes, we do. It's obvious to know that the horse sheds are at the top of the list. Yes, because architecture is like can be a deterioration of a building can be like a cascading problem. If you get holes in the roof, then you got water coming in, then you have water on the structure, then the structure suffers, then the structure suffers and the walls suffer. So yeah, things have to be taken care of. It's a typical stitch in time kind of procedure. So the report itself will determine the order of things that need to be done. But we're pretty sure the horse sheds are first.
Is our meeting house one of the few that still have horse sheds? Are there other meetings that have horse sheds? Do you know?
There are other ones that have horse sheds. I can't say exactly how many, but I'm sure that maybe probably not more than 50% have a shed, but
There are quite a few. I have a tally going.
Okay.
And some meetings have turned their horse sheds into buildings like Radnor. Haverford has horse sheds in our immediate area. Valley has horse sheds. So I'll show you, I'll share my
Library.
list.
Library has the last in Philadelphia.
okay,
Mhm.
that's good to know.
Yeah, so Gwen, so the report that Dan is going to be doing, it will be looking at all the buildings and the site and everything, and it will give us this priority list that he was talking about. And this is what we're raising money for at this point, to do this report that will then be our map for how we go forward. Then we as a meeting can determine what we want to focus on, and then we will have the total estimate there, and we can raise money for those components that we want to preserve going forward. We can break it into pieces and spread it out, or we can try to do, maybe bundle it up for a larger fundraising campaign. But this is the roadmap, and this is the first phase that we're involved in right now with Dan.
Dan, I just want to thank you for sharing all this with us and for your tender, loving care for our beloved building. And I did have a question. Does the meeting house have a basement?
No, it does not have a basement. It has an extremely shallow crawl space.
Hmm.
When I was a child, some years ago, as you face the entrance, on the right-hand side, if I remember right, there was an angled double like doors that opened. And they told us as kids that that's where they kept the bodies before they buried them. Is there any truth in that?
Well,
Yes.
I'm not surprised that Quakers are that honest, because that is might be something you wouldn't tell a child, but that is a burial vault. Yes, in their wisdom and with the inability to dig during the wintertime when the ground is frozen, bodies would be kept in there until the spring thaw so that they could be buried in the ground. In fact, there's a rack down there made out of iron, which is probably 8 feet wide and 6 feet deep, which may have held 4 coffins at a time.
Is that part of the project?
It was part of the original project from the Milner report, yes. And something I didn't show, but we rearranged some downspouts. That's right in the inside corner of the T. So it's right in the inside corner of the T. So it has drainage problems there. And one of the closets inside is constantly wet because of that. Water was getting trapped in that back corner of the T. So the vault of the roof of that burial vault, of that holding vault, is curved out of brick. It's an arch of a vault out of brick. So one side of it leans right against the wall of the meeting house. So water there runs down on the side. We rearranged the downspouts there to make the drainage a little better in a previous project. So
Thank you, thanks.
mhm.
I've often wondered if that was just a scare story, or
No.
if there was any truth. I never had the nerve to go down into it. So.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's a very cool place, Bill. And if you get down, I'll take you inside.
I was going to say, Ross showed it to us a couple of years ago.
Right.
Had the doors open and we all had a good look.
Yeah.
And it's exactly like you described.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. But when Dan said that it's a very low crawl space, the crawl space is so close to the ground that you have to lay on your stomach to get anywhere in there. I mean, you can't even, it's not even a crouchable crawl space.
Right.
And Dan, is that because of settling or because of that's just the way it was constructed?
That's the way it was originally built. And actually one of the possible treatments that we recommended in the Milner report was to take up all the floor, take out the floor joists, put a concrete slab in that area with about 2 inches on top where wooden sleepers could be laid down and the original floorboards could be put back on top. So it would still look the same as it does now, but we would get rid of that crawl space. It is a place that's a haven for termites and moisture problems. Yeah.
And because it's so low, it doesn't get a lot of air circulation, so moisture can build up and cause damage to the wooden beams and structures. So they've all been replaced in the past. Isn't that right, Dan?
Some of the floor joists have been replaced during the porch project, because we had the brick mason there, the stonemason brick mason there for the chimney and the porch. We did rebuild those couple window wells on either side of the meeting house out of brick, so their air can flow from one side to the other better.
So one
This
of the
is
other,
Martha.
Go ahead, Martha. Go ahead.
Well, this is Martha Engel. I've got Mom on an Alexa device too, so sorry about that feedback. Have you all thought about putting any kind of dehumidifier down there then in order to ameliorate the dampness?
There is a dehumidifier that runs in the closet near the holding vault, yes. The crawl space itself doesn't have that much moisture problem, just that one corner, inside corner where the holding vault is. And
Which I think we've solved pretty much with that last intervention, Dan.
Yeah, oh, good.
Yeah. One of the questions that has come up many times in the past that maybe you can address, Dan, is, was the meeting house built in 2 sections? Is that why it has that T format, floor plan, since it's so unusual? And what did you find in your research?
Both David Facenda in his thesis and John Milner Architects and I in our preservation plan are of the 100% opinion that the building was built in one phase. If there had been if the top of the T was built first, the bottom of the T was built second, then there would be a foundation wall that went across that connection, and there is no foundation wall across that connection. So we're very sure that the building was built in a T shape in the beginning. We don't necessarily ascribe to thinking it was made in a cruciform for any particular reason. Of course, churches have been in that shape for centuries. It's just built like a Welsh country church rather than a typical side-by-side tandem male-female meeting house that we're accustomed to. And the main room at the top of the T is considered the men's room, and the men's meeting room, and the bottom of the T is considered the women's, I think, by most opinions.
I have a question about the cruxes. Could you explain those a little more? I think I saw a show on Notre Dame de Paris, and that has similar bent structures, wooden structures that are built into that. Is that the same structural technique?
It actually began in agricultural structures, in that heavy timbers, rather than being hewn into any kind of shape, were actually just taken right out of trees. So a tree branch that came out of a trunk could be carved into this hockey stick shape, which then bears on the foundation wall. There was their opinion that by directing the force downward that way, it would not push the wall outward. So yes, that's a technique that you'll see. And if you web search Cotswold barn, for instance, or Crock framing, you'll see those things made out of natural pieces of wood, actually. But to make
this PBS show actually showed them cutting trees to restore some, I think it was 17th century English, French structure, major palace or something, I don't know.
Yes, that's absolutely right. In the case of Marion meeting, they would have taken a board which was maybe 2 feet wide and cut out all but the part that we have remaining. They would cut down to a certain point and then cut straight down, so they got that shape.
Does it work? I mean, structurally?
Well, we believe it worked until the center one was cut when the chimney was installed. Yeah. It's hard to tell when the movement started, but we suspect it's been that around that time.
Hi, Dan. This
Hello.
is Melinda. So one thing you didn't talk about was on the back of the meeting house, there are two now boarded up defunct outhouses, I guess. And this is a sore point for those of us who use the meeting house. So
Right.
we walk all the way down to the activities building to use the facilities because there's no running water in the building.
Right.
Could there ever be a plan to use that space for composting toilets or somehow, I don't know, modernize?
Well, this was somewhat of a frustration for us when we were doing the life safety study, because the ideal thing for a building like this would be to have a sprinkler system inside, a wet pipe sprinkler system, so that if it ever caught fire, it would be put out immediately. We can't do that because there's no water in that part of the site, and there's no drainage, no sewer drainage. So it's no sewer drainage, so we can't have the toilets. Your composting toilet idea is a good one. I don't know whether Lower Merion would, sewer authority would permit that. That would be something to suggest, maybe. It's a sustainable type of sewer system. I know from the 1960s and 70s. When we started studying solar architecture, that was the same. We advocated for those systems as well. It's just a matter of expense to put in a sewer pipe. I'm sure there are sewer pipes in Meeting House Lane or certainly Montgomery Avenue. But the idea of a portable potty or a composting toilet is a good one.
We'll add that to the list, Melinda.
I'm sorry, and my engineers could answer that question easier than I could, but.
And Speak Byberry has been going through that same discernment. And composting toilets have come a long way. I highly recommend you look at, I think it was the Bronx Zoo or Brooklyn Zoo, one of those two has an amazing composting toilet system. That being said, you are outside of the city, so that may help. For Byberry, it became not a consideration. The city would not give us approval for it. But that being said, because of the climate queries from Frank, I see Frank on here, and Jean Marie, I think that's a really important consideration for composting toilets if you can go that way. And if I can just take one. Oh, sorry.
How much would it cost to put in a sewer line? Remember, right there, if there's a sewer line going down Meeting House Road, wouldn't it be fairly short and efficient just to go in there? Or is that just too much?
That's short, yeah, short and efficient. Yeah, we would need to get a whole plan for that, Bob. I can't imagine it would be cheap though. But we can wrap this into our planning. The thing, we can at least explore it and then know what it would cost and then consider that as an option for the money that we raise.
Excuse me. And then put in a sprinkler system too. I mean,
right. That in a perfect world, yes.
I mean, if we knew how much it cost, at least we'd know what we're dealing with.
Exactly.
That was shocking to us what the cost of the sewer was. But if I can just go back to one quick thing that I wanted to say, which was Ross had mentioned very early on this question around where we should be putting our resources and helping the homeless and helping with food shortages and all of those things. And I just have to say, I always put my outreach hat on and say, keeping these buildings viable is so critical to our in-reach outreach. When you drive past a church, you can't tell whether it's a Catholic church, an Episcopal church, Lutheran church often. When you drive past a meeting house, now I'll say Marion's a little different than most, but you recognize it as being an important part of Philadelphia history. And so I am 190,000% behind the importance of these buildings. And so well done for working on the Keystone Grant to help get that support. So thank you for your work.
I'll second that idea, absolutely.
And I just want to say I didn't pay her to say that. But thank you, Susan. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And thank you, Dan, for your expertise and your long-term commitment to helping us at a Marion Friends meeting to preserve our buildings in respect for the past and out of hope for the future. We are thinking about this series of lectures to continue it. And as I'd mentioned, we're going to have Dennis Montaigne giving a talk on the burial yard and stone preservation in June. Please go to marionfriends.org to see our website. And I certainly hope that you will share our mission with others and help us with our fundraising efforts to preserve this National Historic Landmark. And happy National Historic Landmark Day. So thank you all. And thank you, Dan. Thank you, Scott.
Dan.
Thank you, Scott, for all of your help too.
Sorry for the rough start to the presentation. I hope we all enjoyed it and learned something.
Oh, we did. And hello, Alice. It's so good to see you.
Hey.
Yeah.
Alice is our longtime member who's down in the Southwest
Here, go
now.
ahead and say what you want to say, Mom.
I said, thank you for including me and God bless you all. And
God bless you.
I will be interested in the money raising part as well.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
So,
afternoon.
Just a reminder for everybody, we are recording this, so we'll make this available on the Marion Friends meeting website.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Do you know the date of the next presentation?
Do we have that date, Scott?
I don't think we do yet, so
No.
we'll have that posted on our website, and we'll send out a save the date message to everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everybody.
Bye.